They helped us once, and humanity returned them in ways that changed everything. Part 1. The Gift from the Stars. The year was 2089, and Earth was going to die. Scientists had discovered the asteroid 3 years earlier. They named it 7, and it was the size of a small mountain. Every calculation, every simulation, every desperate attempt to find another answer led to the same conclusion. The asteroid would hit Earth in 6 months. Nothing humanity possessed could stop it. Daniel Hayes stood on the roof of the United Nations building in New York City, watching the chaos below. He was 52 years old, a commander in the United Earth Defense Coalition, and he had spent his entire career preparing for threats he could fight. This was not one of them. The streets were filled with people. Some were praying, some were crying, some were breaking windows and taking whatever they wanted because laws meant nothing when the world was ending. Daniel had sent his wife and daughter to a bunker in Colorado, though he knew it would not save them. Nothing would save anyone. "Commander Hayes," a voice said behind him. It was his assistant, a young woman named Cole. Her face was pale. "You need to see this." She handed him a tablet showing a live feed from satellites in orbit. Daniel looked at the screen and felt his heart stop. Ships were appearing in the sky, not human ships. These were different. They were shaped like silver crescents, graceful and beautiful, and they moved without any visible engines. There were dozens of them, hanging silently above every major city on Earth. "What are they?" Daniel whispered. "We don't know, sir. They're not responding to any communication attempts." For 3 hours, the world held its breath. The alien ships did nothing. They simply waited, as if they were observing humanity in its final moments of despair. Then they spoke. Every screen on Earth, every radio, every communication device suddenly carried the same message. The voice was strange and musical, but the words were clear. "People of Earth, we have watched your species for many generations. We have seen your struggles and your triumphs. We have seen your capacity for both cruelty and kindness, and we have decided that you deserve a chance to continue." Daniel rushed to the United Nations Assembly Hall, where world leaders were gathering in confusion and fear. On the main screen, an image appeared. It showed a being that was clearly not human. That was tall and thin, with pale blue skin that seemed to glow faintly. Its eyes were like opals, shifting through colors as it moved. It wore simple white robes, and when it spoke, its voice carried a sadness that Daniel could not explain. "I am ambassador of the people. We possess the technology to destroy the asteroid that threatens your world. We offer this gift freely, with no conditions and no expectations. We ask only that you remember us kindly." The room erupted in chaos. Some leaders demanded to know what the aliens wanted. Others accused them of tricks or deception. A few fell to their knees in gratitude. Daniel was chosen to meet with directly. He did not know why they picked him. Perhaps because he was calm when others were panicking. Perhaps because he asked questions instead of making demands. He boarded a small shuttle that took him to the largest ship, which hung above the Atlantic Ocean like a second moon. Inside, the ship was beautiful. The walls curved like the inside of a seashell, and soft light came from everywhere and nowhere. The air smelled like flowers Daniel could not name. Met him in a circular room with windows that showed the stars. Up close, she was even more striking. Her movements were slow and graceful, like someone moving through water. "Commander Hayes," she said, "thank you for coming." "Thank you for offering to save us," Daniel replied. He felt awkward, unsure of the right words. "I have to ask, though, why help us? You don't know us, you owe us nothing." Made a gesture with her long fingers that Daniel later learned was their version of a smile. "That is the correct question. Most of your leaders asked what we wanted in return. You asked why we would give." She walked to the window and looked out at Earth, blue and green and fragile against the blackness of space. Long ago, when our civilization was young, we faced a disaster much like yours. A disease swept through our population. We did not have the science to stop it. We were going to die, all of us, and there was nothing we could do. She paused, and Daniel saw her opal eyes grow darker. Then strangers came, a species we had never met, from a part of the galaxy we had never explored. They gave us the cure. They asked for nothing. They told us that kindness was the only currency that mattered in the universe, and they hoped we would pass it forward someday. What happened to them? Daniel asked. They are gone now. Their star went dark many thousands of years ago, but we remember them. We built monuments to them. We teach our children their names. And we promised ourselves that when we found a young species struggling to survive, we would do for them what was done for us. They deployed their technology the next day. They called it the Shattering Lens, a satellite that could focus gravitational waves into a beam of incredible power. Daniel watched from the observation deck as the device activated. There was a flash of light in the distant sky, and then 7 was gone, reduced to dust that scattered harmlessly across the solar system. Earth was saved. The celebration lasted for weeks. People danced in the streets. They painted murals of ships. They named their children after. For a brief moment, humanity forgot its differences and came together in shared relief and gratitude. But Daniel noticed something that others missed, as the prepared to leave seemed tired. Not physically tired, but something deeper, a weariness of the soul. On the day before their departure, he visited her ship one final time. "I wanted to thank you again," he said, "and to ask if there is anything we can do for you, anything at all." Looked at him for a long moment. Then she spoke words that would haunt Daniel for the rest of his life. "We are dying, Commander. Our sun is failing. It grows weaker each year, and in perhaps 200 of your years, our will become too cold to support life. We have searched for a new home for many generations, but we are fragile creatures. Most worlds are too harsh for us. We have accepted that our species will end." Daniel felt something break inside his chest. There must be something we can do. "You are kind," said, "but you are young. Your species has only just begun to reach the stars. By the time you have the power to help us, we will be gone." She placed a thin hand on his shoulder. "Do not grieve for us. We have lived long and well. We have passed our kindness to you, and that is enough. All we ask is that you remember us." Her ship rose into the sky the next morning, and Daniel watched until it disappeared among the stars. He made a promise that day, standing alone on the roof of the United Nations building. He did not know if he could keep it. He did not know if anyone could. But he promised anyway. He would find a way to repay the debt. They helped us once, and humanity returned them in ways that changed everything. Part 2: The Remembering. 60 years had passed since the saved Earth. Daniel Hayes had lived a full life. He became an admiral, then retired, then grew old in a small house by the ocean in Maine. His wife passed away when he was 73. His daughter gave him 2 who visited every summer and listened to his stories about the aliens who came from the stars. But he never forgot his promise. He never forgot the sadness in his eyes when she spoke of her dying world. Daniel spent his final years gathering information. He collected everything humanity had learned about during their brief visit: their biology, their culture, their desperate search for a new home. He wrote letters to scientists and politicians, begging them to start a project to help them before it was too late. Most people ignored him. They were far away, and humanity had its own problems. Wars still happened. Climate change still threatened coastlines. There were always more immediate concerns than a species that lived on the other side of the galaxy. Daniel died at 89, sitting in his chair by the window looking out at the sea. But before he passed, he gave all his research to his granddaughter. Hayes was 32 years old when her grandfather died. She was a planetary scientist working at a research station on Mars. She had inherited Daniel's stubborn nature and his inability to accept defeat. She read through his papers over the course of a week. When she finished, she sat alone in her small room on Mars and cried. Not for her grandfather, though she missed him terribly. She cried because she understood now what he had been trying to do, and she knew she had to continue his work. The problem was enormous. They lived in a distant part of the galaxy that humans had barely begun to explore. Their sun was failing, and they needed a planet with very specific conditions. The right gravity, the right temperature, the right atmosphere, and even if such a planet existed, they were physically delicate. They could not survive on a harsh world with dangerous wildlife or extreme weather. It seemed impossible, but had learned from her grandfather that impossible was just another word for difficult. She started small. She published papers about thee and their situation. She gave speeches at scientific conferences. She reached out to other researchers who might share her interest. Most people were polite but uninterested. A few called her a dreamer. One professor told her she was wasting her career on a fantasy. Then she met Park. Was 26 years old, a junior astronomer working at a deep space observation station called Horizon's Edge. He had read papers and been fascinated by them. Unlike most scientists, he did not think she was crazy. He thought she was asking the right questions. "I've been searching," he told her during their first video call. "Every night, I point our sensors at different star systems, looking for planets that might work for the... I haven't found anything yet, but I'm not giving up." Felt hope for the first time in years. "How long have you been searching?" 3 years, said. "Ever since I read your first paper, I figure I owe them my life same as everyone else. The least I can do is look." They worked together for the next decade, used her connections to secure funding while refined his search methods. They faced constant setbacks, equipment failures, budget cuts, political changes that threatened to shut down their work entirely. But they kept going. In the year 2152, called in the middle of the night, his face on the screen was pale with excitement. "I found it," he said. "I found it." The planet was in the Cygnus Arm, a region of the galaxy that humans had only recently begun to explore. It orbited a stable yellow star with billions of years of life remaining. Its gravity was almost identical to Prime. Its atmosphere was breathable for. Its temperature was perfect. Stared at the data for hours, checking and rechecking the numbers. It was real. After all these years, they had found a potential home for the... But there was a problem. The planet was not empty. It had no intelligent life, but it was covered in dangerous ecosystems. Predators with poison fangs, plants that released toxic spores, insects that swarmed in clouds thick enough to block out the sun. Previous expeditions by other species had attempted to colonize it and failed, though with their fragile bodies would not survive a week there. Looked defeated when he told her, "It's the perfect planet in every other way, but we can't send them to die." Was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled, and it was her grandfather's smile, the one that said she had just decided to do something that everyone else thought was impossible. "Then we change it," she said. "We make it safe for them." "That would take decades," protested. "Maybe centuries. We would need to terraform the entire planet, balance the ecosystem, eliminate the predators, build infrastructure. It would be the largest project in human history." "Yes," agreed. "It would be, and that is exactly what we are going to do." She stood before the Galactic Assembly 1 month later. The chamber was filled with representatives from Earth, Mars, and the orbital colonies. They listened politely as she explained her plan, but their faces showed doubt. "This will cost trillions of credits," one representative said. "It will require resources we need for our own people. And for what? For a species that lives on the other side of the galaxy." Took a deep breath. She thought of her grandfather, watching the ships rise into the sky, making a promise he knew he might never keep. 60 years ago, they saved 7 billion lives, she said. They asked for nothing in return. They only asked us to remember them kindly. Well, I am asking you to do more than remember. I am asking you to act. Every child born since that day exists because of them. Every discovery, every achievement, every moment of joy, all of it is theirs. We owe them a debt that can never be fully repaid, but we can try. The vote was close. Many representatives remained unconvinced, but in the end the motion passed by a narrow margin. The Remembrance Project was born. Walked out of the assembly hall into the sunlight, was waiting for her, grinning like a child. "We did it," he said. "We actually did it." Looked up at the sky, where somewhere, impossibly far away, a species was slowly dying because their sun had betrayed them. "No," she said quietly, "we haven't done anything yet. The real work is just beginning." She was right. The road ahead would be long and hard. Many people would give their lives to walk it. But for the first time since Daniel Hayes made his promise, there was a path forward. Humanity was going to repay its debt. They helped us once, and humanity returned them in ways that changed everything. Part 3: The Long Work. The first ships arrived at the planet in 2155. The colonists called it new, even though no had ever seen it. They hoped that someday that would change. Samuel Grant was 30 years old when he stepped off the transport ship and took his first breath of alien air. It smelled wrong, sweet and rotten at the same time, like fruit that had been left in the sun too long. The sky was pale green instead of blue, and two small moons hung on the horizon like watchful eyes. Samuel was a security captain, hired to protect the terraforming teams from the planet's wildlife. He was a practical man who did not believe in doing things for free. When his friends asked why he had volunteered for a mission that would take him years from Earth, he told them the truth. The pay was excellent, and he was bored. He did not tell them about his grandmother, who had been pregnant with his mother when Seven was falling toward Earth. He did not tell them about the stories she used to share, sitting on her porch in Oklahoma, about the beautiful blue-skinned aliens who saved the world and asked for nothing in return. He did not tell them that sometimes, late at night, he wondered if his life meant anything at all, and this mission felt like a chance to make it mean something. Those were private thoughts. Samuel kept them to himself. The work was harder than anyone expected. The terraforming teams built climate adjustment stations to modify the atmosphere. They introduced new species of plants and insects to balance the ecosystem. They constructed roads and buildings and power systems, everything needed to support a civilization. But the planet fought back. The predators were the worst. They were creatures like wolves, but larger, with 6 legs and teeth that could bite through metal. There were flying things that hunted in packs and could strip a person to bones in minutes. There were serpents that hid in the grass and struck without warning, their venom killing within seconds. Samuel lost 3 members of his team in the first year. He wrote letters to their families, explaining how bravely they had died, knowing the words were inadequate. No letter could capture the screams, the blood, the terrible speed with which life could end on this hostile world. Some colonists wanted to quit. They demanded to be sent home, arguing that the mission was not worth dying for. Samuel understood their fear. He felt it himself every time he walked beyond the perimeter walls. But he stayed, and slowly others began to stay too. Torres was a medic who arrived in the 3rd year of the project. She was small and quiet, with dark hair that she kept tied back in a practical knot. She worked long hours in the medical tent, treating injuries and sicknesses that Earth doctors had never seen before. Samuel noticed her because she never complained. When others cursed the planet and talked about going home, just smiled and kept working. He asked her about it one evening when they were both taking a rare break outside the mess hall. "Why are you here?" he asked. "Really, this place is killing us." Looked up at the green sky and the twin moons. "My great-great-grandmother was in Mexico City when the asteroid was supposed to hit. She was 19 years old and pregnant with my great-grandmother. She had already picked out a spot on the roof of her apartment building where she was going to wait for the end. She paused, and Samuel saw something complicated move across her face. Then the came. They saved her. They saved my great-grandmother, who wasn't even born yet. They saved my grandmother and my mother and me. She turned to look at Samuel directly. 4 generations of my family exist because some aliens decided to be kind for no reason. I figure the least I can do is spend a few years making them a place to live. Samuel did not have an answer to that. He just nodded and went back to watching the perimeter. But something changed in him after that conversation. He started to see the mission differently. It was not just a job anymore. It was something larger, something that connected him to billions of people across time and space. The years passed. Samuel grew older. His hair turned gray, the scars on his arms and face. He watched friends die and new colonists arrive to take their places. He watched the planet slowly change, becoming safer and more welcoming with each passing season. The predators were pushed back. The toxic plants were replaced with gardens. Cities began to rise, built in the graceful curved style of architecture, based on images recovered from the original meeting decades ago. Hayes visited once, near the end of her life. She was 93 years old, frail and thin, traveling in a medical shuttle that kept her alive with machines and medication. She should not have made the journey. Her doctors had begged her to stay on Earth. But she needed to see it. Samuel was the one who guided her wheelchair through the central plaza of the first completed city. He pointed out the buildings, the gardens, the monument being constructed in the center of the square. "It's beautiful," whispered. Her voice was barely audible above the wind. "More beautiful than I imagined." "It's ready," Samuel said. "The planet is ready. Now we just need to find them." Smiled. It was a tired smile, the smile of someone who had been fighting for a very long time. The search ships launched 2 years ago. They should reach space within the decade. She reached out and took Samuel's hand. Her grip was weak, but her eyes were sharp. "Promise me," she said. "Promise me you will see this through to the end." Samuel thought about all the people who had died building this world. He thought about who still worked in the medical center, her hair now as gray as his. He thought about his grandmother, sitting on her porch in Oklahoma, telling stories about blue-skinned angels who fell from the sky. "I promise," he said. Died 3 months later, on the journey back to Earth. They buried her ashes in the central garden of Nu, beneath a tree that would grow for centuries, marking the spot where a woman who refused to accept the impossible finally found peace. The memorial wall in the colony now held hundreds of names. Each one was a person who had given their life for a species they had never met. Each one was a testament to what humanity could accomplish when it chose kindness over indifference. Samuel added his name to the wall himself. Then he went back to work. There was still much to do, and he had made a promise. They helped us once, and humanity returned them in ways that changed everything. Part 4: The Finding. The human ship New Horizon entered space on a cold morning in February 2198. Captain stood on the bridge, watching as the stars shifted around them. He was 45 years old, with steady hands and a calm voice that his crew had come to rely on during the long journey. He had been chosen for this mission because he was patient, because he listened more than he spoke, and because he understood that first contact with a dying civilization required more than military precision. It required compassion. "We're being scanned," his navigation officer reported. A young woman named Diana Collins, barely 23, her fingers moving quickly across her console. "Multiple ships approaching. They don't seem hostile, but they're definitely curious." Nodded. "Open all channels. Let them hear us before they see us." The message had been prepared years in advance, translated into the language using records from the original contact in 2089. Had memorized every word. People of this is captain of the human vessel New Horizon. We come in peace with gratitude in our hearts. 109 years ago, your people saved our world from destruction. You asked for nothing in return. You asked only that we remember you kindly. We have not forgotten. We are here to repay our debt. The silence that followed lasted for 3 long minutes. Watched the approaching ship slow, then stop, forming a loose ring around the New Horizon. They were beautiful vessels, silver and graceful, exactly like the ones in the old photographs from his great-grandfather's time. Then a voice came through the speakers. It was musical and strange, but the translator converted it smoothly into English. Human vessel, we did not expect this. Please come to we must speak face to face. Prime was dying. Could see it from orbit. The sun that had warmed this world for millions of years was now pale and weak, a tired old star that had given everything it had. The planet below showed the scars of a civilization in retreat. Cities that had once sprawled across continents were now dark and abandoned. The oceans had receded, leaving vast plains of dry sand where ships had once sailed. Snow-covered regions that historical records said had been tropical forests. The population centers that remained were clustered near the equator, huddled together for warmth like survivors of a shipwreck. Landed his shuttle in the capital city, a place called Landing. He later learned it had been named after the ambassador who had saved Earth, honoring her memory in the way her people honored all their great figures. The who met him at the landing pad were thin and weary. Their blue skin had faded to a pale gray, and their opal eyes seemed dull. They wore heavy robes against the cold and noticed that several of them were elderly. There were very few children. A woman stepped forward. She was taller than the others, with eyes that still held some of their original brightness. She introduced herself as granddaughter of the ambassador who had spoken to Daniel Hayes a century ago. "Captain," she said, her voice was soft but steady. "When we received your transmission, many of our people did not believe it. They thought it was a signal from the past, somehow reaching us across time. They could not accept that humans had come all this way after all these years to find us." Reached into his uniform pocket and pulled out a small device. He activated it, and a holographic image appeared in the air between them. It showed a planet, blue and green and beautiful, with cities glittering on its surface and forests spreading across its continents. "This is new," he said. "We have spent the last 43 years preparing it for you. The gravity is correct for your biology. The atmosphere is safe to breathe. The temperature is warm. The wildlife has been managed. There are cities waiting, built in your architectural style, ready for you to move into." Stared at the image. Her opal eyes, which had thought were dull, suddenly filled with light. He realized she was crying, though they did not cry the way humans did. Instead, their eyes simply brightened, glowing with an inner light that represented deep emotion. "Why?" she whispered. "Your people spent decades on this. You spent resources you could have used for yourselves. You spent lives. Why would you do this?" Thought about everything he had learned during the long journey. The stories of Daniel Hayes, who made a promise he could not keep. The work of Hayes, who dedicated her life to keeping it anyway. The sacrifices of Samuel Grant and Torres and hundreds of others who gave everything to build a world for strangers. "Because you helped us once," he said simply, "and we wanted to return that kindness in a way that mattered." The news spread across Prime faster than the weakening sun could set. A new home, a chance to survive, a gift from the species they had saved a century ago, returning across the vastness of space to repay a debt they had never asked to be repaid. Many did not believe it at first. They had lived so long with the knowledge of their own extinction that hope felt foreign, almost painful. Some were afraid it was a trick. Others worried that they would arrive at this new world only to find it hostile, another disappointment in a long line of disappointments. Herself volunteered to make the journey first. She boarded the New Horizon with a small delegation of scientists and leaders, leaving her dying world behind to see if the impossible was actually true. The journey took 3 weeks. When the ship emerged from faster-than-light travel and New appeared on the walked slowly to the observation window and pressed her hands against the glass. The planet below was everything the humans had promised: blue oceans, green forests, white clouds drifting across a world that was alive, thriving, waiting. Fell to her knees. The other gathered around her, their eyes glowing so brightly that the observation deck seemed filled with stars. "My mother used to tell me stories," said, her voice breaking. "She told me about the human commander who asked why we helped his people. She told me about the promise she saw in his eyes, even though he never spoke it. She died believing that humans would remember us kindly. She never dreamed." She paused, unable to continue. "She never dreamed they would remember us like this." Knelt beside her. He was not a man who showed emotion easily, but his eyes were wet. "Your mother gave us a future," he said. "We wanted to give you one in return." They landed at the central city, the same plaza where Hayes had walked years before, where Samuel Grant had made his promise. The trees had grown tall. The gardens were in full bloom. The buildings stood ready, their curved walls gleaming in the sunlight of a young, healthy star. Walked through the streets in silence, touching walls and windows and doors. She breathed the air that had been made clean for her people. She felt the warmth of a sun that would burn for billions of years. "It's real," she said finally. "It's actually real." Smiled, "Welcome home." The word echoed through the empty city, bouncing off buildings that had never heard voices, waiting for generations to hear them now. Home. For the first time in 200 years, the people had a future. And humanity had kept its promise. They helped us once, and humanity returned them in ways that changed everything. Part 5: The Legacy. The Great Migration began in the spring of 2199 and lasted for 15 years. Human ships made the journey hundreds of times, crossing the vast distances between Prime and New. Each trip carried thousands of refugees, their possessions packed into small containers, their hearts full of fear and hope in equal measure. Samuel Grant, now 89 years old, watched the first settlers arrive. He stood at the edge of the landing field, leaning on a cane that he hated but needed, his gray hair blowing in the warm wind. Beside him stood Tors, still small and quiet, her dark hair now completely white. "We actually did it," said softly. "After all these years, we actually did it." Samuel did not answer. He was watching a young girl step off the transport ship, her opal eyes wide with wonder as she looked at the blue sky and the green trees and the golden sunlight. She could not have been more than 10 years old. She had been born on a dying world, raised in the shadow of extinction, and now she was seeing hope for the first time in her short life. The girl noticed Samuel watching her. She walked over to him slowly, her movements careful and graceful in the way of all. When she reached him, she stopped and looked up at his weathered face. "Are you one of the builders?" she asked. Her voice was high and musical. "My grandmother told me about you. She said humans made this world for us." Samuel nodded. "We did." "Why?" It was the same question that had been asked 100 years ago when saved Earth. The same question that echoed through generations. Samuel had heard it so many times, and he still did not have a perfect answer. "Because it was the right thing to do," he said finally. "Because your people helped us once, and we wanted to help you back. Because kindness is the only thing in the universe that grows bigger when you give it away." The girl considered this for a moment. Then she reached out and took his hand, her thin blue fingers wrapping around his rough human ones. "Thank you," she said. Samuel felt something warm spread through his chest. It was the feeling of a promise kept, a debt repaid, a life that had meant something after all. "You're welcome," he whispered. The years passed and New flourished. They built new cities beside the ones humanity had prepared for them. They planted gardens that bloomed in colors humans had never imagined. They composed music that drifted through the valleys like living things, songs of gratitude and memory and hope. They adapted to their new world while keeping their old traditions alive, creating a culture that was both ancient and new. And they never forgot what humanity had done for them. In the central plaza of the capital city, they erected a monument. It was made of white stone and silver metal, rising 30 meters into the sky. It depicted two figures standing side by side. One was human, strong and determined, reaching out a hand. The other was graceful and hopeful, accepting the offered gift. The inscription at the base was carved in both languages, human and, it read, "They came to us when our sun was failing. They gave us a world when we had lost our own. They remembered us when we thought we were forgotten. May this kindness echo through eternity." The human alliance became the foundation of a new era in galactic politics. Other species watched in amazement as these two civilizations, separated by vast distances and different biologies, chose to weave their futures together. They formed trade agreements and cultural exchanges. They built ships together, explored the galaxy together, faced challenges together. When other young species asked how the alliance had begun, humans told the same story. An asteroid falling toward Earth, a gift given freely, a promise made and kept across a century. The lesson was always the same. Kindness was not weakness. Generosity was not foolishness. The bonds formed by helping others were stronger than any chain forged by conquest or fear. Lived to be nearly 400 years old, an age considered remarkable even among the long-lived. In her final years, she became a symbol of the relationship between the two species. She gave speeches and wrote books and taught classes for young and humans alike. In her last year, she was visited by a young human historian named Grace. Grace had traveled across the galaxy to record memories, to preserve the story for future generations. They sat in a garden, surrounded by flowers that had been brought from the old before it became too cold for life. The afternoon sun, strong and golden, warmed their faces. "Do you have any regrets?" Grace asked. Smiled. She had learned to smile from humans, though her people had no equivalent expression. It was one of the many small things that had passed between the two species over the centuries. "Only that my mother did not live to see this," she said. "She saved your world expecting nothing in return. She believed that kindness was its own reward, and that humans would remember us fondly even as we faded away. She could never have imagined that her small act of generosity would grow into all of this." She gestured toward the window, where the lights of a thriving city glittered beneath an alien sky. "That is the nature of kindness, I think," continued. "You plant a seed without knowing what it will become. You give without counting the cost. And sometimes, if you are very fortunate, your small seed grows into a forest that shelters generations yet to come." Grace recorded every word. When she returned to Earth, she shared the story with anyone who would listen. She wrote it in books and taught it in schools and told it to her own children, who told it to their children, who told it to theirs. The story became legend. The legend became tradition. The tradition became a part of who humans were, woven into their identities so deeply that no one could imagine a universe where it had not happened. And somewhere, in the great mysterious darkness between the stars, the kindness continued to echo. Travelers from both species carried it to new worlds. They helped young civilizations struggling with disasters too large to face alone. They gave gifts freely, asking nothing in return, only hoping to be remembered kindly when they were gone. "Why?" the young species always asked. "Why would you help us?" The answer was always the same: because someone helped us once, because we made a promise, because this is what kindness does. It grows, it spreads, it changes everything. And it never really ends. The old eventually became too cold for anyone to visit. The cities crumbled into dust. The monuments weathered away. The songs and stories faded into silence. But the people lived on. They remembered their lost world, but they did not mourn it. They had a new home now, a gift from friends who had crossed the impossible distances of space to repay a debt of gratitude. And in the central plaza of their capital city, beneath the monument of two figures standing side by side, visitors from across the galaxy stopped to read the inscription and learn the lesson that two species had taught the universe. Kindness echoes through eternity. It always had, it always would. This was their legacy. This was their gift. This was the story of what happened when humanity remembered and returned and changed everything. The end.